Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this special video. I haven't done something like this for a very long time. I'm joined by my friend, the man, the myth, Steve from Hardware Unboxed, and today we're just going to be talking about the latest AMD announcement. So how are you going, Steve? You having a nice night?
Yeah, really nice night. Just nice and relaxing, sitting back. What about yourself?
Oh, same thing, man. Same thing. So yeah, I thought this video would be quite fun. I was gonna make a my opinion video on it, like I've done previously, but I thought it'd be a bit more fun to make it a bit more of a discussion with
Yep.
Steve. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the AMD APUs, although they're not going to be called that going forward, but just for the sake of making it easy for you guys to understand, that's just what we'll refer to them as. So we actually got quite a bit of information about them, which is quite good. So what do you make of them so far, Steve? Things like they got a U at the end, so that'll be help you guys understand it. Yeah.
The desktop APUs have actually it's a G at the end of them.
Oh, the
Use the
G and
mobile
the
stuff.
mobile ones are the U. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I assume G on the desktop just stands for graphics. So desktop
Yeah.
processors with graphics enabled, and that'll be Vega graphics. But yeah, they seem quite exceptional, really. It looks like looking at the updated processor price list that the Ryzen 5 2400G will be replacing the Ryzen 5 1400,
Yeah.
and the Ryzen 3 2200G will be replacing the Ryzen 3 1200.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, yeah, it's a quite odd because both of them are actually better than the X models in the series as well. So yeah, so basically it looks like the Ryzen 5 2400G will make all quad-core Ryzen 5 CPUs that exist right now pointless, redundant,
Yeah.
and the Ryzen 3 2200G will do the same. So it'll basically eliminate the Ryzen 3 1300X, which, looking at the updated pricing, that's going to be $130, so that's going unchanged, $130 US for the 1300X. And then the 2200G comes in at $99 or $100 US.
Yeah.
So $20 US less. It's the same CPU essentially, just clocked. I think it's 100 or 200 megahertz higher.
Yeah.
And you get the Vega GPU.
Yeah. So that's looking really good. So just to maybe break this down, because I know a lot of people maybe watch these announcements and they maybe didn't understand it. So when we look at the 2200G and the 2400G, as you guys can see on the screen right now, the main difference there, aside from the 2400 having double the threads at 8 opposed to the 4 of the 2200, slightly higher clock speeds there, are the CUs, or compute units. So there's the 11 for the 2400G and 8 for the 2200. So what does that really mean? Like, what are these compute units, maybe for people who are newer to tech that maybe don't understand why they would buy the one with 11 over the one with 8, for example?
Okay, well, basically, comparing it more to your GPUs, people in the audience are probably more used to hearing about stream processors or cores, basically.
Yeah.
And so each compute unit has a cluster of 64 stream processors or cores. So that means the 2200 would have 512 stream processors.
Yeah.
And that is the same amount as the RX 550, which isn't a particularly powerful GPU. I think compared to the RX 550, we'll have less memory bandwidth because that has something like 100 gigs per second with the DDR5 memory, and you won't be getting that as system memory. But the cores within the 2200G will be clocked more aggressively because they are Vega based. So that'll be, it'd be interesting to see. There was a slide AMD showed with the 2400G, and they were saying that would be, or looked like they were suggesting it would be similar to a GeForce GT 1030, which is a little bit quicker than an RX 550. And as you said, the 2400G, that has, was it 11 CUs?
Yeah, 11,
And what does that give us in, that's 704?
7 something, isn't it? Yeah.
704, I think. So that's in between an RX 550 and an RX 460, or a cut down RX 560, same thing really.
Yeah.
So that would put it on par with a GT 1030, which, that's not mind-blowing performance by any stretch of the imagination, but it's certainly good enough for games like CS:GO, Rocket League, and possibly, Overwatch titles like that on lower quality settings, maybe your Fortnite, hard to say there. So a really good, capable all-in-one solution there for, a mini home theater PC / gaming console type build. And so that's $170 for the 2400G. So that would do that. The 2200G for $100, that's really basic gaming. It's obviously a lot better than a Core i3 7100 or a Core i3 8100.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to really compromise on resolution and quality settings to get playable performance in even basic games like Rocket League, I'd say.
Yeah. And this is good for AMD, I think, because obviously this is attacking the very, very entry-level area that Intel has, I would say, dominated, but not for the lack of... Like AMD have been trying to attack with the previous APUs this sort of entry-level price point. I mean, if you just look at the sheer quantity of APUs they've been producing, they have tried to get in on this price point. And I think they have done decently well out of it, but I think this will be a really good hit from what we're seeing. I think this is really going to give Intel quite a bit of a kick, but obviously we'll have to see. They launch on February 12th, so then we'll be able to test them out, and that will be quite good. And I think from a value for money perspective, if the performance is to be believed of what AMD, but of course this is, we always have to take it with a grain of salt when it's the companies saying that the performance is whatever, you don't want to get overhyped by it, but for sure it should have, by comparison to say like this slide shows, the 8400 with the GT 1030, the power consumption should be quite a bit less, so maybe that will be important for people who are buying at this price point. That might be a big consideration for them, but so we'll have to see how it goes at that price point.
Yeah, I mean, I only talked about it from a gamer's perspective as well, so this obviously opens up a lot more markets to them. Your basic office type computer, that's where the 2200G will be useful. They don't really care too much about 3D performance. They just want to be able to use Windows, and not having to spend extra money on a graphics card there can really cut down costs, especially on many systems.
Yeah.
So it makes them a bit more attractive for the sort of business type use as well, where the lower end Core i3s and locked Core i5s are doing quite well.
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, accidentally I got them confused, which is easy to do. The G and the U. The U are the mobile ones. So these have already launched, two of them. The 2700U and the 2500U, but then we're expecting the 2300U and 2200U very soon. So that's AMD finally. This is what I've said. I said this maybe a year and a half ago, that I thought the biggest market for AMD would be the mobile area, in terms, because Intel has just had an absolute monopoly on it, both at the low end and at the high end. And this is going to be really good, I think, for AMD in terms of bringing in some money and really attacking Intel, because of course now they have the Ryzen CPUs going into these laptops as well. 8-core CPUs going into laptops, which is good. That's obviously on the higher end. But now you've got these APUs as well going in on the lower end with the Vega graphics. So what do you think about this, Steve, as well? Do you think this is going to be, I mean, it's obviously going to be a good move to hit Intel here, but how do you think AMD is going to go finally getting into Intel on the mobile platform that they've had a monopoly over for the last how many years,
Yeah, well, they've definitely got a good product now.
Yeah.
The key is going to be getting support, and I don't have the slides here, but they talked about Dell, Acer, and quite a few other big players now offering multiple models, and will have the biggest range they've ever had in the company's history. So that there suggests, it's going to be a very big deal for them.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be a really good as well. So those are two areas that I think will be quite interesting to follow. But obviously, the majority of you guys out there are gamers and wanting to know more about the upcoming Ryzen 2 or Ryzen Plus, and of course the new motherboards that will be coming out, the B450s and X470s. And we'll start with the motherboards then. So for me personally, I think this is actually going to be similar to what we saw. Probably the closest thing in my mind it'll be comparable to is going from Z170 to Z270. I honestly think it's going to be one of those very sort of incremental upgrades with very few differences on it, at least from what we've seen right now. It's good that a lot of them were addressing VRM issues that some of the Ryzen motherboards had. But yeah, I think this is going to be more just an incremental thing. Of course, the Ryzen CPUs as well, you will not be required to upgrade to the new motherboards in order to run the next generation Ryzen processors, which will be good. You will not have to go to a B450 or X470 in order to use those CPUs. So that's a good thing. I think that was nice too. Because I think a lot of people were getting very angry at Intel for this constant having to upgrade the motherboard with your new CPU. So what do you think, Steve, anyways, about the B450s, X470s from what you've heard so far? What do you feel?
Well, there's not a lot of concrete information to go on. I don't have the slide in front of me at the moment, but I don't think there's much on it. They said improved power consumption. That would be for the chipset or the chip itself.
Yep.
So I don't think that's going to make any significant difference to overall power consumption, but every bit helps with efficiency. So yeah, that's good. I don't think, like you say, there's going to be any significant changes. We might see slightly better connectivity options. I did read somewhere where they were changing the PCI Express support from version 2 to 3.
Yep.
So that would be better for connecting an NVMe storage device, for example. You'll actually get full bandwidth on that. You could connect 2, but that wouldn't really be of benefit because you've still only got the 4 times lane to the CPU. So you wouldn't be able to use 2 at full speed anyway, but you could at least use 1, which you can't really do now. But beyond that, I don't think, there'll be too many differences. Hopefully, you'll be able to drop in these new Ryzen second generation processors into your B350 motherboard without any problems, which, as far as we can tell, you won't be able to. That's what AMD is saying. And
you will be able to.
So yes, you will be able to drop these. Yep. Sorry. And obviously there'll just be a BIOS update required, and hopefully all features and the CPU's performance and overclocking and all that stuff is exactly the same. I'd expect that it is. And as for the B450 rather, that'll probably just it'll be the same deal as what we see with the B350 and the X370. So a few less USBs, perhaps SATA ports, and possibly a few less PCI Express lanes, and it won't support multi-GPUs, but that's obviously a bit of a non-issue. So I think you pretty much summarized it there, though, or hit the nail on the head with the Z170 and Z270 comparison. I think it'll be a very similar situation.
Yeah, I think a lot of us were expecting something like that. So moving over to the actual Ryzen Plus CPU. So we'll be going down to the 12 nanometer process, the Zen Plus. So that'll be interesting. They're saying here higher clocks, precision boost 2 technology. If you don't understand what that was, it's basically like Intel's turbo boost to a certain degree. But they're expanding it now. So from what I'm aware of, it's going to the cores will be able to. This is right, isn't it? They'll be able to work more independently. You know, the cores will be able to boost up.
Yeah, it's a refined version.
Yeah.
So we've seen it in the laptops already. So it will be interesting to see comparing that on the desktops. But yeah, it's just a more refined version of what they already had.
Yeah. So that will be for some people, the non-overclockers, that will obviously help. For overclockers, that's not going to matter to you guys because you're obviously going to just overclock them anyway. So that won't affect you at all, any benefits there. But if they're saying the higher clock speeds, because this is what I would say the vast majority of us reviewers were saying, is that Ryzen, the CPU is very good value in terms of the cores and everything else. The main thing that was holding it back was the clock speed. The fact that you would pretty much only get 4 gigahertz out of any Ryzen CPU, no matter if you got whichever one. I've tested a whole bunch. Plenty of people have told me, I think people that haven't actually tested that many, or maybe people that don't even own a Ryzen CPU, were saying to me, Kevin, your Ryzen CPUs aren't overclocking as high because they're the non-X models. Say if I got a 1600 or 1700, just take it from me, guys. So you can take it from Steve as well. I've probably tested about 50 different Ryzen CPUs, and it doesn't matter if it's an X or a non-X or whatever it is, whichever, a 1200, a 1700, 1800X, whichever. They all seem to go to around 3.9, 4 gigahertz. Maybe you get a real good one, you get 4.1 out of it. Maybe you get a bit of a stinker, you get about 3.8. But it's just luck of the draw which ones you get, where they kind of go. But obviously there's still a solid clock speed, but considering where Intel is now with the 8700K, the very high speeds of them, even things like the 8600K, a lot of us were asking for higher. So what difference do you think? How much they're saying higher clocks, but how much higher do you think they're going to go up to?
That's a good question. Look, I would say anything less than 10% would be disappointing. I'd say we're expecting at least a 10% increase in frequency. So that means the parts that are sort of 3.9 to 4 gigahertz now with the XFR clock speeds. 4.5, maybe 4.6, if that's your 10%.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd be hoping for. Like the 1800X, that hits 4.1 gigahertz, and the Threadripper chips, they go as high as 4.2. That's with the XFR. So, yeah, seeing those figures only extended to 4.3, 4.4, I think that would be disappointing.
Yeah. I just want to explain as well. I was meaning in terms of all core overclocks before, rather than just straight up XFR. Speeds,
again, just 10% on the highest base frequency. So I think that's for Threadripper. Is that, what does that go up to? The highest base. It is.
I mean, the best CPU, the best Ryzen I ever tested was when I had the 1900X. I got that up to 4.3, and that was pretty phenomenal. But on all 8 cores on it, that was quite good to get all 8 4.3.
Yeah, out of the box sort of stuff.
1950X, you get about 4.4. 1950X base is 3.4.
Yes. So the highest base is 3.8.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
you'd expect it to go up a little bit. I mean, I think I'd be disappointed if we couldn't if the new average for a Ryzen Plus CPU overclock was, say it only went up to 4.2 or 4.3, I would be quite disappointed. I think I'd be very happy if we started seeing them 4.4, 4.5. I would be happy with that. I think that would be good. All 8 cores. That would be very good. 8 cores at 4.5 or something, that would be solid. But
4.5 is what I'm hoping for.
Yeah. I think that would be where a lot of us are hoping to see it, because that's the main thing. Now, going from the for maybe newer users, Steve. So what does it mean then when AMD's going from the 14 nanometer manufacturing process down to 12 nanometer? So what does that really mean for the
basically
user?
That is where we're getting our 10% frequency increase, is that new manufacturing process. That is essentially what's going to enable that. And we should also see power improvements as well with that. So if you guys don't understand it, it's basically, to put it in a very basic way, they can pack more into the same size die. To put it, was that fair to say, Steve? In a very basic way, it's just more stuff, more transistors,
more stuff in the same area. So that's basically all that means. So yeah, that's the main things we're looking at now. Hopefully, we will also see better efficiency as well, power efficiency. That's usually the case with a change in the nanometer going down. Well, that's what we've seen consistently through the years. Anyway, is that usually you get, say, higher clock speeds. You also generally will get more a more power efficient CPU out of it.
Yes.
Just by nature, that's more advanced and stuff. Of course, Ryzen as well is getting more mature now. When it first launched, as you guys, plenty of you guys know, we had a lot of problems. It was very new. The board partners got. It's not fair to say they got caught. It's more that they got rushed, and
they got rushed. Yes.
Yeah, and things weren't ideal. Steve had the Asus board early on, and you had. How would you describe that experience, Steve?
I don't know if the week from hell is probably overstating it a bit. I was very excited to test Ryzen, very, very amped up, and it went horribly for I think 3 days. I was pulling my hair out at least. So yeah, that didn't go as smoothly as we'd planned, but anyway, they sorted that out by the time Ryzen 5 came around. That launched quite smoothly. Ryzen 3 wasn't a problem. And I think that's the biggest difference we're going to see with these X470 or even the 400 series chipsets, is that they will be more mature to begin with. They will have had more time to develop them. And the board partners, Gigabyte, MSI, all these companies, they will probably be more willing to throw money at components and development of the boards, because they'll be more confident in how many they can sell based on how popular Ryzen was, and the second generation Ryzen's surely going to be just as popular, if not more so. So yeah, I think across the board, and the other things they will have been working on as well is memory support. That will hopefully have been a big one. I'm sure it will have been. They're probably looking at improving memory compatibility, memory latency. We've seen with Ryzen there's a lot of extra performance to be had from improving memory latency, particularly for gaming. So there could be a performance improvement to be had by improving things there as well.
Yeah. So the other announcement they had was Threadripper 2, which will be coming up, but that will be much later. So we're going to see some of these APUs will be coming out in February, as we said earlier. Then all of this stuff will be coming out in April, I believe. We'll see the new motherboards and the new Ryzen Plus CPUs. And then we will be seeing the upgraded Threadrippers much later in the year. I believe it's, do you know, is it Q3 or Q4?
For the Threadripper release, I don't know. They've just, at this point, they've only said it will be second half of 2018. And it, with the second generation Ryzen CPU release, I think they'll probably follow a similar format to what they did last year with the initial release of Ryzen. And that will probably be that we see Ryzen 7 first, then a month later Ryzen 5, and then Ryzen 3. I doubt they'll drop them all at the same time. But they might. But yeah, so that's yet to be seen. So I don't know exactly what we'll be getting in April.
Okay.
And then Threadripper later in the year, and that'll be followed by the Ryzen Pro desktop processors. But that's probably not of huge interest to our audiences.
Yeah, probably not. So so it's going to be very interesting. I mean, I think a lot of us tech reviewers thought like we had such a good 2017 in terms of the tech. A lot of us thought like there's going to be this huge drought in 2018. We're going to be, really struggling for new things to review. But judging from this, actually looks like it's going to be quite a bit. So then the question comes to people out there that are maybe thinking, maybe they're currently on Ryzen, or maybe they're on an older platform, an Intel AMD platform, and they're thinking, well, this will be good then. I'll wait till April and then I'll buy my new, say, X470 motherboard, get a Ryzen Plus CPU. But what are you thinking Intel is going to be doing? Because obviously right now they have the Coffee Lake CPUs, which were quite well received for the most part, better than they previous generations have been received, because it actually seemed like Intel was really trying to bring it this time, really trying to innovate. So what do you think the Intel response is going to be here? Because we know there's going to be the enthusiast platform is going to be getting an upgrade at the end of 2018. So Q3, Q4 we'll see the like Coffee Lake, X or whatever is going to be coming out for the enthusiast platform. But what are you thinking on the mainstream platform for Intel?
Well, I think they've shown their hand there. I don't think we're going to see much new. We're still waiting for Coffee Lake to technically be released correctly. So, because depending on what you plan to do in the future and what your upgrade is, really buying a Core i3 Coffee Lake CPU doesn't really make sense, since the motherboards cost the same or more than the CPU, and they're locked parts for the most part. So, and even the Core i5-8400, I love the look of that chip. I know there's a bit of controversy with the base clock on that being 2.8 gigahertz, but yeah, it looks like a good chip. How it will perform on a B360 is yet to be seen. But I think the big thing we're really waiting for is, the B360 chipset to come in and see how these locked lower end parts perform on that board. So that's really what we're waiting for there, because if you look at the prices of AMD's recent price update and how that corresponds to the Intel processors, like say you got a Core i3-8100, $117, and that's a really powerful quad-core CPU there. The problem is it's not particularly great value when the cheapest boards are like $110, $120. The Core i5-7400 and 7500, they're around $180, $200. Again, they'd be really nice on $70 boards, but not particularly great value on $120 boards. So I think from Intel, we're really just waiting for those new chipsets and boards to come in. And they won't be far away at all, I wouldn't think.
No, and that's, I think, what a lot of us said, that things like the 8400 the 8400 is a really good CPU. The problem is that there's just not the motherboard there, the cheap board to pair with it, and then that would just be a killer value for money combo. Even though it is locked, I mean, that's a hell of a CPU, and that's why a lot of us said you would still pick something like the Ryzen 1600 with your B350 over the 8400 when motherboards are considered. Now, if I had to pick out of those two CPUs, just the CPUs by themselves, I personally would pick the 8400. Personally, that's what I would go with. But when we bring in the motherboards, then I would pick the 1600. Would you agree with that, Steve? Would you disagree?
There's quite a few factors at play there. Again, it depends on what you want to do and what your plans are for the future. See, the Core i5-8400, that's a middle road thing. Like, I mean, it's true for any of them. The 8100s, the Core i3-8100 is hard to justify on a Z370 motherboard. It doesn't really make that much sense. The 8400, you could go either way, because you could get a Z370 board because you want to take advantage of higher clocked memory now, which will help the 8400 in certain situations. And then you might say, well, down the track, I want to get a Core i7 unlocked processor, and then I can have overclocking, and I don't need to go get rid of this motherboard and then buy another motherboard. So there's that aspect of it as well. Or if you're just comparing the Core i5-8400 to something like the Ryzen 5 1600 with a buy now sort of that's it for the moment, then that's a tricky one. I honestly don't know which way I would go. It really depends on what you want to do with your system. If you're just purely gaming and that's it, then I'd probably get the Core i5-8400. But if you do a lot of like rendering or encoding work or any kind of workload where the extra threads of Ryzen can give you a significant time advantage, then you'd probably be best off leaning that way. And the truth is, for gaming, if you're buying a GeForce GTX 1070 or anything slower, then it really doesn't matter between those two, because if you're playing at 1440p or even 1080p with ultra quality settings, the difference in performance there is going to be negligible. So
so I think it's going to be a good 2018. I think a lot of us are looking forward to it. This is going to be it's made to, speaking as a tech reviewer, I think the fact that Ryzen's come along, AMD's really getting back in the game, has made it a lot more fun for all of us. We got a lot more to test. There's a lot more, obviously with me, the channel Showdowns, obviously Steve's channel with all the mass benchmarking. It's given us a lot more to do, a lot more to cover. And I think it's really good for you guys, the consumers as well, because it's, competition's a really good thing. It breeds innovation. It lowers prices as well, because they're fighting to get the sales now. And I think that's going to be really good. To be fair, the price of the 8700K is pretty expensive. But I imagine once that's, I think, due to supply problems, which has kind of inflated it a little bit. And once we see that be solved, as Steve was saying before, that Coffee Lake's had a few problems with supply. If you haven't noticed, there's quite a few places out of stock with them in certain models. So once that gets alleviated, I would imagine the prices would start coming down a bit. It should, in theory. Maybe Intel will be greedy and leave them high, but I would surely imagine they would come down as AMDs have come down over time.
Yeah, they're starting to fall in line now. I think you can, at least in the United States, you can buy an 8700K quite easily for about $390, and that's about $20 US over the MSRP. I think the Core i5 8400 that we're talking about before is about $10 over. I think summarizing 2017, 2018, like you were saying, 2017 was a really exciting year for enthusiasts in general, tech reviewers in particular, because we could finally compare CPUs instead of just recommending Intel constantly.
Yeah.
So that was good. It was obviously exciting, confusing, a bit of everything for consumers. Probably exciting for reviewers and somewhat frustrating for consumers is how I would summarize 2017 between the Coffee Lake paper launch, let's say, DDR4 memory pricing, which is just getting worse by the week at the moment, availability of GPU. So it was a really frustrating year. There was a lot to get excited about, but a lot to get frustrated about. And then 2018, I think it'll be better later in the year. I really hope DDR4 pricing will improve later in the year. It's certainly not going to for the first half. SSD pricing will probably get better before DDR4 pricing, and then, like you said, you'll see the Coffee Lake CPUs fall in line. We may see some really cool discounts on Ryzen as we get the second generation stuff. So yeah, and then graphics cards now are skyrocketing again due to a few factors. So I don't know when they're going to come back down to MSRP levels.
Yeah.
So yeah, still a bit of frustration for consumers, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's sort of a given take. I think when I watch Paul from Paul's Hardware, he's done sort of 2 videos on it, why it's really good to be into like PC tech right now, when maybe it's a really good time to build a PC, and why it's a really bad time. And it's sort of for those factors that you just said. We got all this, new technology. There's so much more competition now. There's such a huge, variety-wise on the CPU front. This is the best it's ever been. You have so much variety. There's so many choices on the mainstream platform, on the enthusiast, down at the entry level. You've just got so many choices there. But at the same time, the DDR4 prices being the way they are and everything else, and some of the shortages with these CPUs, I think the majority of those cons will be alleviated, as you were saying, as we go through 2018. Surely by Q4, I would imagine most of these things would have been sorted. In which case, it's going to be the sort of ultimate time, I would imagine, if you needed a time. But of course, everything's always changing, and we'll just have to see how things go. But yeah, I want to thank Steve for doing this video with me. I just thought it'd be fun for you guys. I'm sorry if everything wasn't as great as it could be. It's my first time doing this. I haven't used OBS in like 2 years, so I was just getting used to it. It's changed a lot since the last time I used it. But I want to do something like this a bit more in the future. But I want to ask you guys, what did you think of this video? Do you like this type of thing? Maybe we do it again with maybe another person, me, Steve, and maybe we'll get someone like Wendell to come on. I think that would be quite fun. What do you guys think? Is it something you would like to see? And let me know in the comment section down below. So thanks, Steve. Thanks for coming on. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me. It was a good discussion. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, it's I'm looking forward to it. I mean, if there's one CPU I'm probably going to be looking forward to testing the most, it's going to be the new Ryzen Plus, whatever the replacement is of the Ryzen 5 1600, whatever their
Yes.
new version of that's going to be. That'll be the main one I'll be looking to test, because obviously, that's going to be the main one people are looking at. But I think that's going to be really fun, and obviously, as we said earlier, the overclocking will be really good. So I thank you guys for watching the video. Head over to Steve's channel, Hardware Unboxed. If you like benchmarking, then oh boy, you're going to have fun on his channel. So go over there and have a look if you like that sort of thing. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.